The commander's face said it all, frozen in disbelief as black smoke billowed from the valley below. Moments earlier, he had dismissed her with 4 cutting words. Let the men handle it. Now, as the hostile convoy burned from a single perfect shot, the command center fell silent. She stood calmly by the mortar, her calculations still open in her worn notebook. No one had expected this from the woman they'd relegated to observer. No one had bothered to ask why she was really there, or what she was capable of when lives were on the line. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story of unrecognized excellence, consider subscribing for more tales of exceptional people finally getting their due. Forward. Operating base. Epsilon nestled uncomfortably in the valley like a thorn in the mountain's side. The early morning light stretched long shadows across the outpost, creating stark contrast between light and darkness that mirrored the tension within its walls. Specialist Adair Coltrane sat alone at a makeshift desk wedged into the corner of the operations tent. Her movements were precise as she recorded calculations in a worn leather notebook, the pages filled with complex equations and notations that few would understand. A strand of auburn hair fell across her face, but she didn't bother pushing it away, too absorbed in her work. The tent buzzed with activity around her, yet she existed in her own bubble of concentration. No one approached her desk. No one sought her input. She might as well have been invisible. Wind patterns looking unusual today, Lieutenant Finch announced to the room, spreading weather reports across the central table. Could affect visibility and targeting. Adair's pen paused mid-equation. She'd already noted the anomalous wind currents in her calculations, having detected the pattern 3 days prior. The valley's unique topography created wind tunnels that standard calculations failed to account for. Commander Thaddeus Blackwell strode into the tent, his presence immediately commanding attention. His gaze swept the room, acknowledging each of his male officers with a nod before settling on the morning briefing materials. He never once looked in Adair's direction. Good morning, gentlemen, Blackwell announced, emphasizing the last word just enough for Adair to notice. What's our status? Adair closed her notebook and approached the central table, standing slightly behind the circle of officers. When Lieutenant Finch finished his weather report, she cleared her throat softly. Sir, I've been tracking these wind patterns since they began shifting. Standard protocols won't compensate adequately for the valley's effect on projectile trajectories. I've developed adjustments that would account for the anomalies. I don't recall asking for your input, Specialist. Blackwell cut her off without turning. You're here to observe, not advise. The tent fell silent. A few officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one spoke up. Adair's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, not hurt or anger, but a quiet, resolute determination. She returned to her desk without another word. Corporal Zephyr Reed, the youngest officer in the unit, watched her retreat. Later, during the mid-morning lull, he approached her desk hesitantly. Those calculations you mentioned, he said, voice low. Are they really that different from standard protocol? Adair looked up, studying his face for signs of mockery but finding only genuine curiosity. She turned her notebook toward him, revealing pages of precise notations. The valley creates a counterintuitive pattern, she explained. Wind speed increases here and here but creates a pocket of near stillness at this elevation. Standard adjustments would overcorrect. Zephyr's eyes widened as he followed her logic. This is brilliant. Where did you learn to calculate like this? Corporal Reed, a sharp voice interrupted them. Major Denton beckoned from across the tent. Stop bothering the observer and make yourself useful. As Zephyr hurried away, Adair returned to her calculations. On the margin of the page, she wrote a small note. Standard protocol insufficient for valley conditions. The afternoon brought a flurry of activity as intelligence reports came in. Satellite imagery showed unusual movement in the eastern sector. As officers gathered around the display, Adair noticed something others had missed, a dust pattern indicating vehicles moving along the rarely used northern route. She stepped forward, pointing to the anomaly. Sir, there's movement here that doesn't match the main report. It could be a secondary force. Specialist Coltrane, Blackwell's voice cut through the tent like a knife. Your job is to observe, not to analyze, not to advise, not to interrupt. Is that clear? Yes, sir, she replied, stepping back. As she returned to her station, she heard Blackwell mutter to Major Denton, Remind me why HQ thought we needed a woman technical advisor in an active combat zone. Denton's response was too low to hear, but the laughter that followed made its meaning clear enough. Adair opened her notebook to a fresh page and began a new set of calculations, her pen moving with practiced precision. If anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed these equations were different, specific to moving targets and variable wind conditions. But no one was looking at specialist Adair Coltrane, not yet. The emergency alert came at Euro 600 the following morning. Adair was already at her station reviewing her calculations for the third time when the klaxon sounded. "Hostile convoy spotted moving through the Northern Valley approach," announced the communications officer, voice tight with urgency. "Multiple vehicles, heavily armed, moving fast." The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers rushed to stations, shouting coordinates and readiness reports. Commander Blackwell emerged from his quarters, still fastening his uniform. "Get me visual confirmation," he ordered, moving to the central display. The drone feed appeared on screen, showing a convoy of 6 vehicles moving at high speed through the winding valley road. The lead vehicle was larger than the others, a mobile command unit, heavily armored. "Identity confirmed hostile," reported Intelligence Officer Laramie. "Signature matches known Insurgent Commander Tarek Kadam's unit." Blackwell's expression hardened. "Primary mortar team to positions. Calculate intercept trajectory for the convoy's exit point at the valley mouth." Adair's attention snapped to the tactical display. She quickly saw the problem. They were calculating for where the convoy would be, not accounting for the unusual wind conditions and the convoy's increasing speed. "Sir," she said, stepping forward with her notebook open, "the wind conditions will push standard trajectory at least 30 meters off target, and they're accelerating beyond expected parameters." "Specialist!" Blackwell's voice boomed across the command center. "Return to your observation post immediately." Major Denton smirked. "What's the matter, Coltrane? Nervous about seeing real action?" "The standard calculation is insufficient for these conditions," she persisted, her voice calm but firm. "Let the men handle it, Specialist." Blackwell cut her off, turning his back to her. As the mortar team rushed to deploy, arguments broke out about the correct adjustment for wind conditions. Precious seconds ticked by. "Convoy approaching coordinate Charlie Echo 7, announced the drone operator. 4 minutes to valley exit point. Corporal Zephyr appeared at Adair's side. "What would you do?" he asked quietly, glancing at her notebook. "The convoy's moving too fast for static targeting," she replied, voice low. "They need to lead the target by at least 70 meters and adjust for the wind pocket at the valley's center." Zephyr studied her face. "You've done this before, haven't you?" A brief flash of memory crossed Adair's features. A different valley, a different convoy, a split-second decision that changed everything. "They called her the calculator at the academy," someone whispered nearby. "Heard she was top of her class before that incident got her reassigned." "Incident?" Zephyr asked. But Adair was already moving, her attention fixed on the secondary mortar position that stood unmanned as everyone focused on Blackwell's ordered deployment. "Convoy accelerating," called the drone operator. "ETA to valley exit now 3 minutes. "Wind conditions worsening," added the meteorological officer, adjusting calculations. "No, your adjustment is backward," argued one of the targeting officers. "In this valley, the wind shifts direction at the narrowest point." "Enough!" Blackwell shouted. "Execute firing solution Alpha." Adair reached the secondary mortar. With quick, practiced movements, she checked the weapon, then began making adjustments based on the calculations in her notebook. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had done this countless times before. Flipping to a page marked with specific equations for moving targets, she performed rapid mental math, accounting for wind speed, valley topography, and the convoy's acceleration rate. She made 3 precise adjustments to the mortar's position. "Convoy at Charlie Echo 9, announced the drone operator. 2 minutes to valley exit." As the command center's attention remained fixed on the primary mortar team's preparation, Adair loaded the shell and took a deep breath. Without hesitation, she fired. The distinctive thump of the mortar firing silenced the command center. All heads turned toward Adair, still standing calmly beside the secondary mortar position. On the tactical display, they watched the projectile arc through the air in a trajectory noticeably different from what the primary team had calculated. For 3 heartbeats, no one spoke. The mortar struck the lead vehicle with devastating precision just as it accelerated around a bend. The explosion lifted the armored command unit off the ground, flipping it onto its side. Secondary explosions rippled through the convoy as ammunition and fuel ignited. Within seconds, the entire valley section was engulfed in flames and black smoke. The silence in the command center was absolute. Commander Blackwell stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. The primary mortar team had not yet fired. "Direct hit on primary target," the drone operator finally announced, breaking the silence. "Convoy neutralized, all vehicles disabled." Every eye in the command center turned to Adair. Major Denton was the first to speak. "Specialist Coltrane, you fired without authorization. That's a direct violation of protocol." "Quiet, Major," came a new voice from the entrance of the command center. Colonel Westfield, the base commander, stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. He walked slowly toward Adair, his gaze shifting between her and the tactical display showing the burning convoy. "That's Lieutenant Colonel Coltrane to you, Major," Colonel Westfield said calmly. Commander Blackwell's face drained of color. "Lieutenant Colonel?" Colonel Westfield nodded. "Perhaps you should have read her full file, Commander." The communications officer's console beeped urgently. "Sir, intelligence confirmation coming in. High-value target confirmed eliminated. It's Tarek Khatam. They've been hunting him for months." Blackwell's confusion was evident. "I don't understand. Her assignment papers listed her as Specialist Coltrane, technical observer from HQ." "After the Kandahar incident," Colonel Westfield explained, "Lieutenant Colonel Coltrane was reassigned pending review. That review concluded this morning." He turned to Adair. "Your new orders arrived an hour ago, but it seems you've already resumed your duties." The command center fell silent again as understanding dawned. 18 months earlier, then Major Adair Coltrane had commanded an elite artillery unit. During a high-risk operation, she had disobeyed a direct order to hold fire when she calculated that the delay would result in civilian casualties. Her unauthorized strike had neutralized the threat and saved an entire village, but military protocol demanded consequences for insubordination. Colonel Westfield turned to the tactical display, studying the smoldering remains of the convoy. "That shot was impossible. Moving target, variable wind conditions, no spotting round." "Not impossible, sir," Adair replied quietly. "Just mathematics." She opened her notebook, revealing pages of calculations developed specifically for the valley's unique conditions, work she had been perfecting since her first day at Base Epsilon, while everyone thought she was simply observing. "Lieutenant Colonel Coltrane," Westfield said formally, "Command wants to speak with you directly." He turned to Blackwell. "Commander, you are relieved for the remainder of this operation. Major Denton, you as well." As Adair followed Colonel Westfield out of the command center, Corporal Zephyr snapped to attention and saluted her. One by one, other officers followed suit until the entire room stood at attention. All except Commander Blackwell, who remained frozen, watching the tactical display where the convoy still burned. In the debriefing room, Colonel Westfield closed the door behind them and gestured for Adair to sit. Instead, she remained standing, her posture perfect, eyes forward. "At ease, Lieutenant Colonel," Westfield said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "The formality isn't necessary between us." Adair relaxed slightly. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted." "Why was I placed under Commander Blackwell's command without him knowing my true rank and background?" Westfield sighed, settling into a chair. "That wasn't the original plan. Your reassignment was supposed to be transparent, but certain elements at HQ thought it would be more effective to observe Blackwell's unit without them knowing they were being evaluated." "Evaluated for what, sir?" "After 3 failed operations in this sector, questions were raised about leadership and tactical decision-making. Your placement was dual purpose, to assess the unit while providing them with expertise they clearly needed." Westfield paused. "Though I suspect you figured that out already." Adair nodded slightly. "I had my suspicions. What I didn't expect was that you'd take direct action without authorization." "With respect, sir, there wasn't time for protocol. The convoy would have escaped if we'd followed standard procedures." Westfield studied her for a long moment. "The same justification you gave for Kandahar." "Yes, sir. The mathematics was clear in both cases." The colonel leaned forward. "Lieutenant Colonel, your calculations may be flawless, but the military operates on chain of command, not mathematical certainty. With respect, sir, perhaps it should operate on both." A communications officer knocked and entered with a secure tablet. Priority transmission from Central Command, sir. Westfield reviewed the message, his eyebrows rising slightly. He handed the tablet to Adair. The message was brief. Lieutenant Colonel Coltrane's actions resulted in elimination of HVT Tarek Kadam. Full reinstatement effective immediately. Assigned to Command Artillery Tactical Development Unit. Pending acceptance. Adair read it twice, her expression unchanging. Well, Westfield asked, will you accept the command? On one condition, sir? You're hardly in a position to make conditions, Lieutenant Colonel. I want Corporal Zephyr Reed transferred to the unit. He has exceptional potential. Westfield chuckled. That's your condition? Not a promotion, not a commendation, but a transfer for a corporal? Yes, sir. Very well. Consider it done. Westfield stood and extended his hand. Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel. It seems your mathematics has prevailed again. The following morning, Adair stood at attention before the assembled personnel of Base Epsilon. Her uniform, now bearing the appropriate insignia of her rank, was impeccable. Behind her stood Colonel Westfield and several senior officers from neighboring bases who had arrived for the occasion. Attention to orders, Westfield announced. By direction of Central Command, Lieutenant Colonel Adair Coltrane is hereby reinstated to full active duty with all rights and privileges of her rank. The formal reinstatement continued, but Adair barely heard the words. Her focus was on the faces before her, particularly Commander Blackwell, who stood stiffly at the front of the formation, his expression carefully neutral. When the ceremony concluded, officers lined up to congratulate her. Most were sincere, some were merely polite, but all showed a new respect that had been absent just 24 hours earlier. Corporal Reed approached last, saluting crisply. Congratulations, ma'am. Thank you, Corporal. Pack your gear. You transfer to my unit tomorrow. His eyes widened. Ma'am? Unless you'd prefer to stay here. No, ma'am, he replied quickly. It would be an honor. As the crowd dispersed, Commander Blackwell approached. His posture was rigid, his eyes avoiding direct contact. Lieutenant Colonel, he said formally, I owe you an apology. Do you, Commander? I made assumptions based on incomplete information. Adair regarded him coolly. Did you read my full file yet, Commander? Yes, ma'am, I have. Then you know my record at the academy and in the field before Kandahar. I do. It's exemplary. Yet you dismissed my input without consideration, repeatedly. Blackwell shifted uncomfortably. I had no reason to question the assignment information I received. You had every reason to evaluate the merit of my contributions regardless of my supposed rank. Adair's voice remained calm, but her words carried weight. A good commander values expertise wherever it appears. Yes, ma'am. I'm developing a new protocol for artillery operations in complex terrain environments. Your unit will be among the first to receive training once it's approved. She paused. I trust you'll approach it with an open mind, regardless of its source. Of course, Lieutenant Colonel. Adair nodded once, dismissing him. As he walked away, Colonel Westfield joined her. That was generous of you, he commented. Many would have taken the opportunity for revenge. This isn't about revenge, sir. It's about improvement. His unit needs the protocol. And the lesson in humility? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. That's just mathematics too, sir. Every action has consequences, positive or negative. Later that afternoon, Adair sat in her new office, reviewing personnel files for her tactical development unit. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. Enter, she called. Major Denton stepped in, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Lieutenant Colonel, I wanted to express my congratulations on your reinstatement. Adair set down her tablet. Did Colonel Westfield order you to come here, Major? He hesitated. Yes, ma'am. At least you're honest about that. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit down. Denton sat stiffly. I'll be developing new calculation methods for variable terrain operations, she said without preamble. Your background in meteorological factors could be valuable to the project. Surprise crossed his face. Ma'am? I'm offering you a position in my unit, Major, not because I particularly like you, but because your expertise is relevant to the work. After how I treated you? This isn't personal, Major. It's about capability. Can you put aside your preconceptions and focus on the mathematics? Denton considered this. I believe I can, ma'am. Good. Report to me in 3 days with your analysis of wind pattern variations in mountainous terrain. She returned her attention to her tablet. That will be all, Major. After he left, Adair allowed herself a moment of reflection. The last 48 hours had transformed her position completely, yet she felt no triumph, only a sense of purpose renewed. The mathematics of human behavior was often more complex than ballistic trajectories, but it followed patterns nonetheless. She opened her notebook to a fresh page and began a new set of calculations, her pen moving with practiced precision. There was still work to do. 6 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Adair Coltrane stood before a classroom of artillery officers at the Advanced Tactical Training Center. Her innovative calculation method, now called the Coltrane Adjustment, had been implemented as standard protocol for complex terrain operations. The key is to understand that no environment behaves exactly as the textbook predicts, she explained to the rapt audience. We must adapt our mathematics to reality, not expect reality to conform to our equations. In the back of the classroom sat Lieutenant Zephyr Reed, who had requested assignment to Coltrane's new integrated artillery unit. Beside him sat several other promising officers, both men and women, selected for their exceptional aptitude for ballistic mathematics. The Coltrane adjustment accounts for 3 variables standard calculations typically oversimplify, Adair continued, gesturing to the complex formula on the display. First, the microclimate effect created by terrain features. Second, the refraction patterns of variable density air at different elevations. And third, the non-linear acceleration of moving targets under combat conditions. A hand raised. Ma'am, how did you develop this without computer modeling? The same way artillery officers calculated before computers existed, Lieutenant, through observation, pattern recognition, and mathematical iteration. She tapped her worn notebook that still accompanied her everywhere. Never trust a calculation you can't do by hand in an emergency. After the lecture, students clustered around her with questions. Adair answered each one with the same patient precision she applied to her calculations. This was her element now, passing on knowledge rather than fighting for recognition. As the room cleared, Major Denton approached with a tablet. The field tests from the Eastern Range came in. Results are consistent with predictions to within 2 meters at maximum range. 2 meters is still 2 meters too many, Adair replied, taking the tablet. Let's adjust the elevation variable and run another series tomorrow. Yes, ma'am, Denton hesitated. There's something else. Commander Blackwell's unit has requested additional training on the new protocol. Adair looked up, studying his face. And I thought you might want someone else to handle it. Why would I? The protocol is designed to be taught by its developer. Given your history with Blackwell, I assumed you'd prefer not to work directly with him again. Adair handed the tablet back. History is irrelevant to the mathematics major. Schedule the training for next month. I'll conduct it personally. Later that afternoon, a senior officer presented Adair with a commendation for her work. She accepted it with a polite nod, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the attention. Lieutenant Colonel Coltrane's innovative approach has revolutionized artillery accuracy in complex terrain, read the citation. Her Coltrane adjustment has already been credited with saving numerous lives through increased precision and reduced collateral damage. The gathered officers applauded. Adair stood stiffly, her expression carefully controlled. This was the part of her position she found most challenging, the spotlight that inevitably followed success. When the ceremony concluded, Lieutenant Reed found her reviewing calculations in a quiet corner. Congratulations, ma'am, he said. The commendation is well deserved. Thank you, Lieutenant. She didn't look up from her notebook. If I may ask, why does recognition make you uncomfortable? You've earned it. Adair considered the question, her pen pausing. Recognition isn't the objective, Lieutenant. Accuracy is. Effectiveness is. Everything else is just noise. With respect, ma'am, recognition ensures your methods are adopted widely. It serves a purpose. She looked up at him then. A valid point. Perhaps I need to adjust my calculations to account for that variable. The hint of a smile softened her features for a moment, a rare glimpse of the person behind the precision. The next morning, long before sunrise, Adair sat alone at her desk, making calculations for her team's training exercise. She was still the first one up, still dedicated to perfection. Her promotion had changed her title but not her nature. A knock at her door surprised her. Few others were awake at this hour. "Enter," she called. Colonel Westfield stepped in, looking tired but alert. "Working early as usual, Lieutenant Colonel. As are you, sir." "Central Command just sent this." He placed a folder on her desk. "They want your assessment." Adair opened the folder to find intelligence reports of insurgent activity in a mountain region notorious for its unpredictable weather patterns and difficult terrain. Exactly the kind of environment where standard artillery protocols would fail. "They're requesting your unit's deployment," Westfield said. "First practical application of the Coltrane adjustment in a combat scenario." Adair studied the reports, her mind already calculating distances, elevations, potential variables. "When?" 2 weeks. Enough time to prepare your team." She nodded. "We'll be ready." As Westfield turned to leave, he paused. "This is a significant opportunity, Lieutenant Colonel. If your method proves as effective in the field as in testing, it could become standard doctrine throughout the artillery corps." "That's the objective, sir. And a significant achievement for an officer whose career was nearly ended 18 months ago." Adair closed the folder. "The Kandahar incident wasn't about my career, sir. It was about doing what the mathematics demanded regardless of the consequences." "And this?" He gestured to the folder. "The same." After he left, Adair returned to her calculations with renewed focus. The coming deployment would be the true test of her method, not in controlled conditions but in the chaotic reality of combat. Lives would depend on her equations being right. She opened her notebook to a fresh page and began planning the training sequence her team would need. Each officer would have to master the calculations under pressure, understand the variables intimately, trust the mathematics even when instinct might suggest otherwise. As dawn broke over the training grounds, she closed her notebook and looked out at the mountains in the distance. A small smile crossed her face, not of pride or vindication, but of quiet satisfaction in doing what she was born to do. In the margins of her notebook, a new note was written. "Standard protocol now sufficient. Moving to next challenge." 2 weeks later, Adair stood before her assembled unit as they prepared to deploy. Among them was Lieutenant Reed, who had progressed faster than any other officer in mastering the Coltrane adjustment. "Our mission is precision artillery support in mountainous terrain with variable weather conditions," she briefed them. "Exactly the scenario the adjustment was designed for. You've all mastered the calculations in training. Now you'll apply them when it matters most." She looked at each face in turn, noting the confidence in their expressions. These officers had been selected for their mathematical aptitude and trained rigorously. They were ready. "Questions?" she asked. A young lieutenant raised her hand. "Ma'am, what if we encounter conditions beyond what we've trained for?" "Then you adapt the formula. The adjustment isn't static, Lieutenant. It's a framework for thinking about variables differently. Trust your observations and your mathematics." The unit deployed that afternoon to a forward base in the contested region. As they established their positions, Adair conducted a final review of the terrain and meteorological data, updating her calculations to account for local conditions. Commander Blackwell's infantry unit was already in position, securing the perimeter. When he saw Adair, he approached with a formal salute. "Lieutenant Colonel, my unit is at your disposal." "Thank you, Commander. I trust you've briefed your officers on the new protocol?" "Yes, ma'am. We've been studying it extensively since your training session." There was a new respect in his manner, born not from her rank but from recognition of her expertise. The mathematics of human relationships had balanced out, just as she had calculated it would. "We'll begin calibration fires at Euro 600 tomorrow," she told him. "Have your observers ready to report impact accuracy." "They'll be ready," he hesitated. "And Lieutenant Colonel, I want you to know that my unit has complete confidence in your method." Adair nodded once, acknowledging both his words and the unspoken apology behind them. "The mathematics works, Commander. That's all that matters." The next morning, as the first light touched the mountain peaks, Adair's unit conducted their initial calibration fires. Each shot landed precisely on target, confirming the calculations were accurate for the local conditions. When the call came for fire support, her team responded with a speed and precision that astonished the infantry units. Targets that would have required multiple adjustments under the old protocol were neutralized with a single shot. The Coltrane adjustment proved its worth not in theory, but in practice. After the operation concluded successfully, Central Command requested Adair's presence for a formal review. The results were undeniable. The Coltrane adjustment would become standard doctrine throughout the artillery corps. "Your method saved lives today," the reviewing general told her, "both civilian and military. That's a legacy to be proud of, Lieutenant Colonel." "Thank you, sir. But the work isn't finished. There are still variables to refine, conditions to account for." "Always calculating the next problem, aren't you, Coltrane?" the general remarked with a smile. "It's what I do, sir." As dawn broke over the training grounds weeks later, Adair watched her expanded team of instructors prepare to deploy to artillery units across the service. Each would teach the Coltrane adjustment, spreading the method that had begun in a single worn notebook. Lieutenant Reed, now promoted to captain, approached her. "The first training teams are ready to deploy, ma'am." "Good. Make sure they understand this isn't just about teaching a formula. It's about changing how we think about the variables." "Yes, ma'am." He paused. "Permission to speak freely?" "Granted." "You never asked for any of this recognition, but without it, your method might have remained just notes in your notebook. Sometimes being seen matters, even when we don't want it to." Adair considered this, then nodded slowly. "A valid calculation, Captain. Sometimes the correct trajectory requires being visible." In the margins of her latest notebook, a new notation appeared. Recognition equals adoption equals lives saved. Acceptable equation. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition but deserved more than anyone else? Someone whose quiet excellence spoke louder than any words could?